Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Beyond the Trailer Park. And joining us, we've got everybody this week, which is awesome. All the way from Pennsylvania is Beth. Good evening, Beth.
Howdy, howdy.
Hey, and yeah, you're still sounding and looking pretty awesome on the new system. So, yay!
Yes, I'm enjoying it. I've been able to watch my videos and listen to my podcast that I listen to without buffering, and it's so nice.
And you sound like fantastic. So.
Yeah.
And you don't have a big wedge of foam on your microphone.
Yeah, to get rid of my S's and P's.
Yep. Awesomeness. And over in the wilds of Mississippi, good evening, Miss Morgan.
Good evening.
Yay. And we'll be all seeing each other very soon.
I'm very excited.
Yay. Excellent. 4 days. And over in New Jersey, and I muted you, Chris, so you're going to have to unmute yourself there for a second. But good evening, Chris Rodda. As soon as she gets herself unmuted. Her pooch was trying to join in the discussion there, so I had to turn her down there for a second. You have to on the screen, Chris. There's at the top center. There's a little microphone. You just got to click that sucker. Uh-oh. Now I'm regretting having done that.
You can't unmute her?
No, oh yeah.
There you go.
Yay.
You got it.
And
it's back again.
Try it again. Try it again. Yeah, no,
there you go.
There we go.
There.
Yeah, I got to quiet it down. My puppy's not behaving very well. I may have to excuse myself and take him outside for a minute at some point here. He just laid down. He's going to be good.
Excellent. No, sorry about that. The host can mute other people, but they have to unmute
themselves.
Yeah, which I don't know.
Really, so the person has control because you can keep trying to unmute them, but they can just like keep talking anyway.
Exactly. And I've been in Hangouts where people have done that, so I don't know why that is.
Have you really?
Yes. Oh yeah. I've been in Hangouts. It is rude, but the people who did it normally didn't care. They were mad that people weren't letting them spiel their stuff. And I've seen some atheist people do it, but by and large, it's been theists, I have to say. So yeah. In fact, the last one was a guy named G-Man, which you may or may not have heard of. He's sequential, but
I've heard he's a nut.
Oh, yes, certifiable.
I don't know who it is.
He's a YouTube personality, a Christian YouTuber. Feel free to Google him later, but there's really not much of something there. In fact, he's just been made persona non grata in the great debate community for calling another member a Nazi. So,
okay,
yeah,
like
and they were not a Nazi, I'm guessing.
No.
Oh, okay.
They're a.
It's okay to call someone a Nazi if they are.
If they are, but no, she's just a double PhD scientist who's a science educator. So.
Oh, okay, and that's what made her a Nazi. The fact that she's a science educator.
I don't know. I wasn't in that particular hangout. I just found out about it like an hour or so ago. But yeah, the lady in question I have been in a hangout with, and she's a lovely lady, goes by Scientist Mel. And like I say, double PhD holder, very, very intelligent woman.
Yeah, usually intelligent women aren't
cover. It's all a cover for being a Nazi.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I don't think she's pulling a Richard Spencer there.
I gotta say, she is another ginger lady, so I don't know, but I'm not a Nazi either, so we have no soul, but we're not Nazis, generally speaking. Anyway, but yeah, so if you really want to torture yourself, feel free to Google G-Man. He's
if you want to talk about Nazis, I actually many years ago, you know Huntsville, Alabama is where they brought all the rocket scientists, the Nazi rocket scientists, right?
Yeah.
Well, actually, many years ago, it's like back in the 90s when I was living in Atlanta, I was going out with someone who was actually the daughter of one of these Nazi rocket scientists.
Oh, so
wow. Because those people were still, those guys, like, they were still alive back then, like most of them. Yeah. So, like, that town was like, it was pretty freaky because you're in the town where it's like, these are like genuine, original Nazis living there. And it's like bizarre.
That would be.
Well, it's Alabama, so I'm sure they feel welcome.
Yeah, right? It was just really like when I found that out about somebody. Oh, by the way, my father was like a Nazi. It's like, okay.
That's a hell of an icebreaker.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right out of pick up lines. Hey, my father was a Nazi.
I know this is totally off topic, but I watched a documentary last year. I don't remember the name of it. I'll have to look it up. But the gist of it was they were talking to actual children of Nazis. And many of them, of course, were utterly disgusted by the actions of their parents. And, some of them had become activists trying to atone for what their parents had done and things like that. But this one guy, his father had been in control of an area in the Ukraine, and they took him back. There was him and another guy, and his father had also had something to do with the Ukraine, and they took them back there. And the one guy, the people of the area where his father had been in control apparently loved his father. And so when this guy came back as his son, they treated him like a king. And he was just eating it up. He's like, oh, I'm so proud of my father. And look at this. And the other guy was just like mortified and disgusted and just like, I want nothing to do with this shit. Like, I'm going to go and speak out against Nazis and racism over here. Thanks. Like, it was just really bizarre. But like the people they had like a parade for him and shit. It was just insane. Anyway, totally off topic for the most part. But anyway, so of course, Chris is our resident expert on all things David Barton. And David Barton, believe it or not, he can't seem to not make up shit about anything to do with history. He has had some influence on the whole debate around the Second Amendment. And we did get into that a bit the other week. We got talking about issues with gun violence and whatnot after we talked to Patrick. And so this is really interesting because I did not know this. But we did mention that a lot of the gun proponents, I guess you want to call them, some people call them ammosexuals, whatnot. The folks that are so over the top, in favor of guns, a lot of them treat it kind of like a religion and seem to believe that they have, outside of the Second Amendment, a right to have weapons. And we come to find that Chris has done a fabulous piece detailing why some of this sentiment can be blamed on good old David Barton. So, Chris, what the hell is this asshole?
Well, it's actually, I recycled. Unfortunately, it's everything in it is still the same 5 years later, but I recycled a piece I had written after Sandy Hook,
right?
After Florida, and basically I debunked. Barton has a book out. It's been out since like 2000, on the Second Amendment, which of course is full of typical Barton edited quotes and all of that sort of stuff. But he basically, I'm going to pull up my own posts here because I had several of them. He's made several claims. One is that there were never any gun accidents in the founding era because everybody had guns and knew how to use them. I'll be majorly debunking that one. I just found out some new, really good, interesting new stuff that I didn't know before. I've got to, if I keep looking at my computer here, because like I had several things that I'm going to be needing to pull up because he's got so much.
Well, yeah, because gunpowder was so safe.
Well, I can even debunk Barton on that because my research into the gun issue, the history of it, is taking me back to the 1750s. So he's full of fucking shit. Well, and that's only school violence. These are school shootings.
School shooting, yeah, in 1700s.
Yeah,
it's there's also quite there were quite a few school shootings. Well, let's not call them school shootings like they are today, but shootings in schools. And the difference, of course, was that, in most cases there was like a clear motive. And the other big difference is they didn't have semi-automatic weapons. So it would be one person or two people, or maybe up to maybe five. Okay, we got shot. But what I found really interesting was I found this article from, it was actually written way back in 2000. It was a New York Times article. It was actually a review written by Gary Wills of a book written by this historian, Michael Bella Siles. I'm not sure if I'm not pronouncing that right. But what this guy did was he went back and looked at how many people really did own guns back there. Because Dave Barton's big thing is like everybody owned guns. All kids were taught how to use guns, gun safety, all of that, like when they were kids, right? Well, according to this guy's research, this is an expert on colonial America from Emory University, the guy that wrote the book, and he's got that in his research, what it was turning up was like less than. I can't kill a dog live on a podcast.
No, probably not recommended.
Totally kidding. Okay. But his initial research, when he started looking into it, he was looking at like the frontier of like Kentucky, Pennsylvania, but the frontier. That what he did was he went through probate records, which list like someone's like every possession they have is their wills with who's getting what, right?
Right.
And found this is going to astounding. Only 14% of people on the frontier owned guns.
Yeah.
Okay. And the more interesting thing that he found, and this is going to rock people's world if people use it in debates, is that, they're always, when Obama was president, the government's going to take our guns away, gun laws are going to take our guns away. Well, there was actually a law. I believe I'm going to look it up in the article. I think he said Connecticut, where because there was such a shortage of people with guns that if the militia needed to be called up, that there was a law that the government, state or like it was colonial government at that time, could go and just take other people's guns to give them to the militia to use. Mm-hmm. So way back then, there actually was a law that the government could just come and take your guns if they needed them.
Well, what I find interesting going through your article and doing some research on my own is that Barton's notions and that people espouse are the exact opposite of the reality of the fact. And
well, it's Barton.
Well, yeah, but it's just like it goes beyond his normal bullshit of ellipses and leaving things out. I mean, he's actually, in some cases, which you showed it in your article, he's like, in one case, I think it was the Kentucky Constitution. He actually changed the wording of the Constitution to fit his agenda.
And I have my own article up here. I'm just going because it was real. Oh, but when we're saying article, it was really the length of like a mini book. Okay, yeah. It was one of my.
Tell me, it took me 3 days to read it again.
Yeah, it was a I debunked his entire book on the Second Amendment as a blog post on the Huffington Post. Like,
yeah, so it reached one of my links.
Like, books. Okay, so that's why I'm saying I have to look like find what she's talking about.
Well, I think the whole essence.
Oh, right, I got here. Yeah, yes. Okay, good.
I was going to say, I think the whole essence of your article, your blog post, whatever, really, I think you summed it up right in the beginning, where you talk about Barton, this one, the 1850s supposed, and it turned out that it was possibly a story taken from Louis L'Amour, and you did.
That absolutely was. Yes.
And what I found is, I don't remember who it was. I think it was in the comment section of the article, or the Louis L'Amour article, was that you actually sent a email. I'm assuming it was an email to Barton asking him to confirm or deny this. Yeah. But now I may have missed it. Did he ever reply to that?
He actually put something out after that saying that Louis L'Amour in an audio interview said that it was a true story, and I found that, and Louis L'Amour did say it was a true story, but it was Louis L'Amour. And Barton also calls Louis L'Amour a Western writer.
I remember that now.
And historian. Now,
I remember that now.
Calls Louis L'Amour a freaking historian. His Western history. He did write a couple nonfiction books, but they were more like, I think, like his memoirs and some book about scenic places in America or something. Okay, he was not an historian. Like, his stories were the things that were like made into John Wayne movies that are totally a distorted picture of what the Wild West was like and all of that. So yes, he did have a vast collection of books on the West and all of this, and Barton goes into all of that, but he was not an historian.
So Barton's taking
that this.
Go ahead.
So I was just going to say, for listeners who may not be as familiar with Louis L'Amour, so David Barton is looking through these sort of fictionalized, these sort of historical fictions, I guess would be fair to call them, and saying these are history.
Right.
Is that what's happening
here?
Basically,
how it came about that this was discovered. This is a separate piece from the one that we were first talking about. I said there was 3 different pieces, but what it was that I wrote a post, the post debunking Barton's whole book on the Second Amendment. In that, I said that Barton had used as an example, what it was a story of, to push the notion of like students should be armed. Okay, it was this story of this somebody coming from the east to kill this teacher out west, and they got in and all the students grabbed their guns and pointed them at the guy and said, "You kill our teacher, we'll kill you."
Yeah, I got the quote right here. It says, "The great example in the 1850s, you have a school teacher who's teaching a guy. He's out in the West. This guy from New England wants to kill him and find him. So he comes into the school with his gun to shoot the teacher, and he decides not to shoot the teacher because all the kids pull their guns out and point it at him and say, 'You shoot the teacher, you die.' He says, 'Okay, the teacher lives.' Real simple stuff." That's
Right. And see, Barton said that wasn't in something he wrote. You know how he's can play even more fast and loose with the truth when he's like talking on a radio or TV show.
Yeah.
So he's not giving any source. So what happened was I put that in the piece that I wrote, the big long serious piece, and what it was somebody in the comments recognized the story as coming from Louis L'Amour.
Okay,
so I
so
went
familiar with his
and,
work.
and found out that that commenter was completely right. And yeah, it was on the Blaze. Barton told the story on Glenn Beck's The Blaze. Okay, so you're just telling this story. So it turned out that yes, in fact, it was a story from a Louis L'Amour novel. So I put out a second piece saying that, you know, and then but back to the thing about the distorting of the history of the thing with Kentucky. What I've got it up here now. What it is he one of the things he does is to edit the quotes from various state laws and constitutions from like the 1700s, 1800s, whatever, to omit any words that either make it clear that what was being referred to was the militia and not individuals, or say that there were gun laws. So the Kentucky example is one of the ones where he Barton gives a list of from state constitutions what their version of the Second Amendment was in their state's bills of rights, which pretty much mimicked the federal Bill of Rights. Okay, so I've got I don't know how many examples I have here, but the first one was Kentucky 1850. What appears in Barton's book is that the Kentucky Constitution's version of the Second Amendment was that the rights of the citizens to bear arms in defense of themselves and the state shall not be questioned. And Barton cuts it off there. What he cuts off is, but the General Assembly may pass laws to prevent persons from carrying concealed arms. Okay? Similar, 1875, same things. He quotes the part saying the right of every citizen to keep and bear arms, yada, 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 but cuts off. But nothing herein contained is intended to justify the practice of wearing concealed weapons. And most of them were about concealed weapons. But here, say Georgia, what he cuts off is, but the General Assembly shall have the power to prescribe the manner in which arms may be borne.
Yeah.
Okay, so all of these, and I've got a list of there's probably about 10 or 12 examples here where Barton did the similar things, where in each case he cut off the end of it, which always said something about the state has a right to pass gun control laws.
Also, I have a question. So, obviously, when these were happening, you know, as you know, I learned constitutional law, and you know, from reading these cases, and also from my own studies and throughout my own history degree. So, at the time, the states would raise militias for the defense of a state or of a newly formed country because we had no standing army at that time. So,
Correct.
does Barton even address that point, or does he just act like that we've always had a standing army?
He doesn't say that, and actually the militias at first actually were kind of, you know, there were people that were nervous about there being a federal government becoming too powerful. Yes. They wanted their own state militia to protect themselves from the scary federal government. So there were some people like that was the reason for wanting, you know, the state militia, but mainly it was just for the defense of their own state, because we're talking, you know, there were Indian attacks, there were uprisings and rebellions and whatever, and I think like a lot of people misunderstand like the word like militia really just means like anyone who is of the age to fight. Like it's not a militia isn't the same thing as like what you think of as like an army unit.
Well, yeah,
okay.
But,
so
yeah,
say like in and this is one that they actually twist to lie about. I believe it was in Virginia, colonial Virginia. There was a law that on certain Sundays, everybody that was militia age that would be required to serve in the militia had to bring their weapons to church. Now, of course, that's used. That's used. Now hold on. Listen to the reason for it though. The Barton and them will use it, turn that into, see, the founders wanted people to be armed in church, and that's why churches were safe or something. Okay, right? No, the reason was that it was to make sure that everyone who was in the militia, who was the law required them to have a certain kind of weapon and ammunition required by law, because people didn't want to. This is the thing. It wasn't like everyone wanted to own guns. Many people, guys, would try to get out of having to buy a gun because they didn't want to. So having them bring their guns to church was a way to muster the militia and have an arms inspection to make sure that every person who was required to had a gun, because they were all having to produce them in the same place at the same time.
Okay.
So somebody couldn't borrow their neighbor's gun and say, see, I've got mine.
Because that was going to be a question I have as a complete outsider, unfamiliar with a lot of this in detail. Because I hear, right to bear, quote, arms. Where does it say that has to be a gun?
Well, I think that was just assumed.
Okay, because I dabbled a lot in medieval history, so to me, bearing arms is a sword and a shield. You know what I mean? So,
well, and actually, the original, I would guess that the original laws that they go back to, because Barton does, wait, I can find it. Hang on. Because these laws do come from, like English laws. Okay, so
yeah, from common law.
All right, so here we go. So Barton uses sites like James Wilson, who was, a signer of the founding documents and was one of the first Supreme Court justices appointed by Washington. Yada yada yada. He was a law teacher. All of that. Wrote one of the first law books. Okay, so Barton cites him quite often. Okay, and he chops up a quote from what James Wilson wrote from one of his law books, where in one part James Wilson is writing about what is considered justifiable homicide, and in another part he's writing about the militia being armed. Right, so Barton takes parts from each to eliminates about 90% of this and gets a few phrases together to make it sound like James Wilson is saying what Barton wants him to have said. If you look at Wilson's sources, what's really interesting is Wilson's sources went back to Edward Cook and Matthew Hale, but the laws in England, which restricted being armed.
Ah.
Okay, so if you trace these laws back to, where did the founding fathers who wrote these laws, they cited their sources. So, but this is what, and this is where from Cook is where a man's house is his castle thing. So there was, so in England, what these laws were like, a person had the right to assemble their neighbors to defend their home. But that same person did not have the right to be armed while traveling.
Yeah. Okay,
so these are the laws that were in England. There was gun control laws at that time, 1500s, 1600s in England.
Yep.
And this is what people like James Wilson drew on. And then there's also the fact that there was never any definition of bearing arms that meant anything other than serving in the military.
Yeah, because I think that a lot of times
that
people lose the context of like the military, and then also you think about they're sort of acting as when you're gathering together to defend your neighbor's property, you're sort of acting in a way as a police force. And at the time, there wasn't really modern police like we would think of them today. Like obviously they couldn't just hop in a cop car and race to your house, or
because the idea of a police force was even still very loosely being used in the beginning of the 20th century.
Yeah, let me get a quote from a case in 1840.
Okay.
And I'm reading my paragraph here. It's like what I wrote about it was individuals who attempted to use the Second Amendment or similar provisions in their state constitutions to argue the right to bear arms, to argue that the right to bear arms meant that they had the right to carry any weapon in any manner that they chose, were not successful. And then I cite an 1840 case in Tennessee where the judge in the Supreme Court of Tennessee, in that case, this is what they said: a man in pursuit of deer, elk, and buffaloes might carry his rifle every day for 40 years, and yet it would never be said of him that he had borne arms.
Oh.
So even as late as 1840, that the phrase to bear arms was, everybody understood that to mean as fighting in the military.
Yeah,
so
this is Tennessee in 1840.
So what if this guy went and hunted every day of his life? That is not the same thing as bearing arms. Okay. So the Second Amendment, when that was written, the founders understood the words bear arms to mean serve in the militia, serve in, you know what I mean? Like there is no question about that if you go and look at the etymology of that phrase.
Well,
right.
I think what's important to keep in mind, or to bear in mind, is that, like you said, to bear arms up until modern times meant military and nothing else. And I think what I find interesting with Barton specifically, and I've done a little extra reading on it, I ended up with 18 pages of notes, is that Barton, while it is important to look at the etymology of what a term or a phrase means and how our founders did it, he intentionally makes, I can't even say the word, the meaning of what the founders, the meaning of what the founders meant. And I think it's really highlighted by the quotes that you mentioned in your article. You know, he like one point you brought out in the article was his use of Williams Blackstone 1766 commentaries on the law. What he leaves off, and you make note of this, and I love it, of England.
Right.
Of England.
Okay, which, if you're doing a proper history and etymology of the word and the phrase, yes, maybe you should do that, but he's doing it to hide the fact, because he knows a general reader, like, okay, well, you can't really call us all general readers because we're, but a general reader is not going to go look up what William Blackstone said.
No.
Right.
A general reader is not going to go look up what James Wilson really said. Most people don't even know who James Wilson is.
It's the same bullshit he pulls with all of his footnotes. He puts shit in footnotes to make it look like he's done research, and then knowing that most people aren't going to go look it up and find out that he twisted.
But they will say, "Oh my God, his book's got 45 pages." If you look at the Amazon reviews, half the reviews say he's got 45 pages of footnotes. Okay, but if you don't look them up,
what good are they?
You know, it's like the same as them saying he's got a library of over 100,000 old documents, as if that means he can't be misquoting them.
Yeah, and my job on Law Journal at law school is more strenuous than that, because what I have to do whenever there is an article that I have to edit, I have to go find the sources for every single one of those footnotes and make sure that it is accurate and being accurately represented in that article. And the fact that my law school has more strenuous requirements than this man who is publishing books and calling himself an expert is, I think, pretty outstanding.
It is.
Well, I think it was a point you brought up. I think it was in Liars 1, was that some of his footnotes, he footnotes the footnotes, so he has more footnotes.
What? What? How does that work?
He will footnote a footnote.
I've never seen that.
Yeah.
I've seen
I can't remember what book he does it in, but I do remember. I think you made this.
And it sounds familiar. I mean, it's a long time since I wrote Liars.
Yeah,
it does sound familiar. Like
he
like that.
And I know other people have also made note of this. Is that to make like he researches this stuff, and he will footnote a footnote just so he has more footnotes.
I mean, that's like something a college student does to skate by.
It's going to drive me crazy now what you're referring to, because I know like it was something that was so fucking crazy.
Yeah. I'll have to try to find it later tonight, because I know what section of the book it's in, but my book for you. I
have a copy here. Wait, what section was it in?
I got a copy.
I don't have it open, so I would have to scan through. But yeah, it's just, and you're not the only one that's made that analogy, because I know, Warren Throckmorton, and I know you two have war words, but he says the same thing. It's just like, and like Morgan said, it's like a juvenile thing. And this is one point I wanted to make, was that, well, David Barton is not a historian. He is not an academic historian. Neither is Chris. But Chris's work, I can look up one of her footnotes and go right to the source she's getting from it. Yeah. I don't know how many PDFs of court cases I have on my, now 2 computers. Because I've done that, because I've looked up the case. Like, if I try to look up any of Barton's stuff, I'm like, I end up with all these like weird. It's really bizarre, because
he'll actually use a harder to find source.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so say like he's citing something
like some obscure
that there is an easily accessible source that is in. Okay, what he'll do is he'll cite a book that's impossible to freaking find. So then you don't know whether it was that book that misquoted it or who misquoted it.
Yeah.
Okay. And he'll make those sources deliberately hard to find. Now, what I did with when I did Liars 1 was I actually put on my liarsforjesus.com website a footnote archive. I scanned, this is back when it was like hard to do this shit. I actually scanned every page of every like we're talking 2006, where it was like to do what anyone can do now was like a job. I actually scanned and put, so people don't even have to go find the books. I scanned the pages of the books and put them up as images for every one of my damn footnotes. How many hundreds of freaking footnotes are in that book? Okay, so that all people have to do as they're reading the book, they can instantly click on my website and say, okay, it's chapter whatever, footnote number whatever, click on it, and the image of the book page or document, or in some cases, if there was a reputable website that had it on the website, I'd put the link to the website that had the source. Okay, so people didn't even have to go hunting for the books that I used. Okay, because at that time some of them were really hard to find. A lot of those now are like on Google Books and crap, but back when I was writing Liars was from
I have some comments. I have some comments from Dave in the chat here. First of all, he says that arms, in quotes, meant any weapon that used or required black gunpowder to inflict deadly.
No, Okay, the word arms would certainly just mean guns. Okay, there's no dispute about that. It's the phrase, the whole entire phrase.
Right.
To bear arms or having borne arms.
Right.
Is what is
military.
Absolutely specifically never meant anything other than fighting military or militia service, like fighting in a battle bearing arms.
Yeah, and the Constitution even makes that
clear. The wording
clear.
of the Second Amendment to say people have the right to bear arms was understood at that time.
You have a right to
bear arms as part of a militia. Okay, and then some of the laws, there were laws, like I was saying, like people which came from Cook and Hale and down to James Wilson and all of that, that yes, people had the right to assemble their neighbors or whatever, to assemble a group to defend their home.
He says,
okay, so there were things that people had a right to do with guns other than be in the military, but there was also a bunch of things that they were not allowed. There were gun control laws. A lot of them were about concealed weapons, particularly in the cities.
Well, he says it also meant cannons. That's why he made this stipulation.
Well, that's actually a good point, and I think, Chris, you kind of addressed this a little bit in your article. I don't know if it was specifically it was this one or not, but you had said concerning plantations and early settlements' defense against Indian raids.
Right.
And I think one point to make here is that we have 2 hours to parse out bits and pieces. And right. I read a paper today. I just finished it just before the show, in fact, that was 36 pages long just on to bear arms. Okay, the number of court cases mentioned, and we might touch on this a little bit later, took up about 30 pages of it. So this is not something we're going to decide in one night. I think what's important is, out of any explanation, and I've seen others like Chris's, they delve into this whole issue of what does to bear arms mean? What does inalienable rights mean? What does militia mean? Et cetera, et cetera. And I think each of us individually, if we're so inclined, need to delve into that aspect. And I mentioned this to Deb before the show, is that I used to be an NRA member back in the late 80s, early 90s. I used to pistol shoot for targets because I blew my shoulder out, couldn't do long guns anymore. But I also was an instructor at a camp for 22 caliber riflery and also for air riflery. So I was a part of the NRA. I left the NRA when I was diagnosed with bipolar because I could no longer felt safe having a gun around, because I probably would have used it a long time ago. But my attitude towards guns started to change with Columbine. Hi, Herc. And it's not just the school shootings. It's just not the Pulse killings or what happened in Vegas that changed my mind. It's the stories we don't read about. It's the 35,000 people that are killed that we don't read about. I mean, well, Deb, I know you know because I told you before the show. How many know about the school shooting about a week ago?
Was that the one in Alabama?
No, I forgot about that one.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
I read about another one and wondered why it wasn't making news. I can't remember where it was.
Yep, that's the one I think, because that was one of the comments made. It didn't make the news because there was only one.
There
was only one victim.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. It's almost as if there's not now a large number of victims, it doesn't even make the news anymore. If there's one or two
most
victims,
people don't.
I mean, it's unbelievable. I mean, it's like what would have been news big news. One, even if it was one or two.
Well, most people don't
now
know there's been 10 shootings since Parkland.
Whoa.
Not even surprised to hear.
I didn't know that. I knew there was one in Alabama, but they weren't talking about it. But they thought that maybe it was because also the victim was a young black girl. And
maybe I am confusing the two.
Oh, that I didn't know. I knew it was only one victim. I didn't know.
Okay, I might be confusing states.
Very well.
And when I say shootings, I don't just mean somebody was killed, but somebody brought a gun to school. It was accidentally discharged. There was one with a teacher not too long ago.
The teacher blockading himself in the classroom.
Yeah, my definition of shooting is very broad because of my research into school shootings. Because I'm going back to any when I initially started was super broad.
As Dave says, or there's, incidents like I accidentally shot my wife 4 times while cleaning my gun.
Yeah.
Or domestic violence, suicides, like those don't get, I feel like those get kind of brushed under the rug as well. But, you think about domestic violence abusers, I mean, they're the ones that are more likely to also get into shootouts with the cops. They're the ones more likely to do these mass shootings. They're the ones more likely to use these guns against their families and people who live with them.
Wasn't
and their abuse victims.
The church in Texas, wasn't that guy that it was he had been in the military, but the military just never put it in his records that he had
I believe so,
charges against him and should not have been able to buy a gun?
That's right.
That was that church.
That's right.
No, it was the one in Texas.
And he shot 20 some people, and he went there and it was domestic violence related because that was the church that is in laws.
Sutherland Springs.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But that guy, because of his record of, and that's one of the gun control laws. One of the things people push for, someone has and there are laws on the books about this already. And
the thing is,
people fall through the cracks.
People say, well, even if you have laws, number one, criminals don't follow laws. And number two, it's not going to stop. Well, yeah, it's not going to stop all gun violence. We know that.
Of course not.
But
nothing is
going to help, okay? Because we have very strict gun laws, at least in terms of handguns. Long guns are a lot easier to come by. I used to have long guns. When I was 16 years old, all I had to do was get something called a firearms acquisition certificate. I went to a 2-day course on gun safety and gun handling. I got my FAC, and at 16 years old, I could buy guns, which I had a couple. But handguns, because let's be honest, these guys are using long guns, and I realize that. But in Canada, it's really hard. You can't walk around with a freaking rifle and not have, somebody call the cops on you unless you're wearing a orange hat and plaid shirt and in a pickup truck, if you know what I mean. But the thing is, with handguns, you basically have to ransom your firstborn child to even take the handgun from your home to a firing range. You have to have a separate permit to take the gun to a firing range. And we don't have mass shootings very often.
Something just occurred to me as you're saying this.
Yes.
About the being able to take a gun. And I'm kind of wondering, you're talking about the way the laws came down in this country from England through whatever. So say Canada, you think it would be even more so, because what you're talking about there almost sounds like the original
probably
gun laws from old English law, with and a big major part of that was people not being able to travel with guns. Right. That was a big part of it.
Because we are still a Commonwealth country,
right,
and
right.
we still technically submit to the Queen and all of that, and we're very, and I believe, and Dave, don't kill me if I get this wrong, because he's saying, yeah, it's like that there. I think you're Australian, if memory serves, or English. I forget. My bad. We haven't been in a hangout together for a while, but wherever it is. But he's saying, yeah, it's like that too. And he's obviously affiliated with Commonwealth. So it's Yeah, I think it is very much tied to that. And
Yeah.
and I've seen a lot of this with American culture, is a lot of the original American culture, and that what people try to cling to is basically anything but British, right? Like whatever is British, we got to be different somehow. And so there's that need to forge do it your own way. It's like a rebellious kid, right? Like,
well, yeah, that's what we've always been, right? Is England's rebellious child. And then also, I was going to say that there's nothing else that gets talked about, like, going back to the thing where, oh, well, there'll still be gun violence. Like, nothing else gets talked about that way. That would be as if someone were to say, oh, well, we need to abolish all the food safety laws because people still get food poisoning.
Right.
It's absolutely ridiculous.
Oh, Dave lives in New Jersey, so does Chris.
Oh.
I think it's kind of an interesting point, though, that you guys have brought out concerning Australia and Canada and the direct line from England versus the United States. That'd be kind of something interesting to delve into. But
because think about it, England wouldn't have had militias.
Yeah.
Because why would they?
So that's where the split comes.
Yeah.
I don't recall us having militias. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty pathetic. I know loads about English history, not very much about Canadian history. I suck. I'm a shitty Canadian, I admit it, but I don't recall us having militias.
Well,
why would you? I mean, like, because you had because England and any part of the Commonwealth would not have had standing army. You would have had a standing army.
Yeah, for England. Yeah.
And France.
And where America then, like, once declaring independence and all of that, it was like, we don't want a standing army. So that's where everything through history that came down from England to either Canada or any other part of the Commonwealth or to America, where things diverged was when America did not want a standing army.
Yeah.
If you think about it.
And the thing is,
that created the need for militias.
The way Canada came to be, I mean, the English part of Canada, we were basically formed as a business, as part of the Hudson's Bay Company. It was, we're going to fur trap and people want to come and get land from us, from the company, and build a business as farmers and trappers and what. Like, we didn't fight.
Several states were like that too. Like, you think about Massachusetts Bay Colony and things like that, where they were given charters by the king. So yeah, that makes sense. But also, yeah, there is this diversion. But I mean, I had a lecture last week about, like, the English court systems and basically tracing through, like, how we do a lot of this common law from England. I mean, still today. So we still very much have that English common law. But yeah, I think that we've just kind of tweaked it more to suit our needs because, we couldn't
there was a lot of the common law. There was a lot of the common law that was replaced by statutes.
Yes. You can't always replace it with statutes.
Get rid of the common law. There was still like both would be brought up, but a lot of the common law was replaced. And also the fact that what a lot of people don't realize is that, like, not all of the early America was under England. So if you look at after Louisiana Purchase, like New Orleans and all that hadn't been under England.
Well, yeah, so Louisiana still does
this
French.
Mishmash of a little bit of common law from people who moved there from colonies that had been under England, okay, and then state statutes, and then like whatever, and then some French laws. I mean, it was like this like mess of laws, and I think it was it one of the Livingstons, maybe Edward Livingston, that finally like digested the laws for like Louisiana or whatever. Like I think it was
yeah, Louisiana is the only state that does French law.
The thing from Blackstone's that Barton misquotes, Okay, now Barton just loves Blackstone. Okay,
of course he does.
Thomas Jefferson, by the way, Thomas Jefferson just absolutely abhorred Blackstone. And a little bit on the history of Blackstone becoming popular in America. The reason for that, and Barton will say, well, Blackstone's was the most popular law book in America. Okay, and usually the reason for that is that because it's got all the offenses against God and all of that crap and, you know, whatever, which never became law in America. But the reason that Blackstone's became so popular in America, an American edition was printed in 1771, was that was when the colonists were gearing up to getting close to rebelling, and they wanted to know what their rights were. Right. That's why so many Americans bought Blackstone. It became like a bestseller. It was because the colonists and because Blackstone's is very easily readable. And like even what did Jefferson call it? An elegant digest of what was in Cook. Okay, and Jefferson would not let his students, and people who were tutoring or whatever, read Blackstone's. Would not allow Blackstone's to be used at the University of Virginia. Barton just loves Blackstone's, but this is on the Second Amendment. This is what how Barton misquotes it. Okay. From Blackstone, I'll read the thing about guns from Blackstone's. Okay. The fifth and last auxiliary right of the subject that I shall at present mention is that of having arms for their defense. And I'm reading it as Barton quotes it, okay? Have arms for their defense, which is also declared in the same statute, and cites William and Mary. And it says, and is indeed a public allowance of the natural right of resistance and self-preservation, and yada, 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 yada. Okay, what it actually says, if you put all the words back in that Barton takes out, the fifth and last auxiliary right of the subject, which I shall at present mention, is that of having arms for their defense suitable to their condition and degree and such as are allowed by law. Meaning, there were gun control laws at the time of Blackstone, and then, which is also declared in the same statute, cites 1 William and Mary, okay, and is indeed a public allowance. What Barton cuts out is under due restrictions of the natural right of resistance. So again, he does the same thing that he does to the versions of the Second Amendment that are in the state constitutions, is just to lop out those words that say that there were always restrictions, there were always laws, there were always gun control laws going all the way back to the 1500s in England and all of that, and that made it basically into the constitutions, of the states and stuff. But he cuts all of those out to make it sound like there was no type of gun restriction whatsoever.
Yeah.
How influential is he in these sort of like anti-gun control discussions? Like how often would you say it comes from Barton?
He's influential.
Basically, from what I can tell, and in my opinion, is that basically the whole notion, this twisting, while it began in the 60s and really solidified around 2001, Barton is responsible for what we have now.
Yeah, and that came down from Miller, largely.
Barton, yeah, from Miller. Barton's rhetoric is basically in the discussions I have, and I can't believe I'm actually gun debate discussions because I avoid them like the plague.
It's hard to avoid them right now. I mean, it's like
it's like
you can't.
Well, I commented even on last week's show. It's like I can't believe we're talking about it. We did a show the week before we got talking. It's like it's not something I normally like to talk about, not because I want to avoid it, but it's an emotionally heated topic, and unless you take the time to do what you did in your article and go even further, I'm not going to be able to make a rational, straight up factual argument. It's going to be based on emotion, and I'll be the first to admit that, yeah, it's an emotional topic for me, because I'm sorry, I don't want to see some kid blown away. I don't want to see nightlife people going out to a bar and getting slaughtered. I think that's just fucking asinine. But everybody brings up this, it's a God-given right that we can bear arms. And I'm like, show me in the Bible.
Oh, Barton has a Bible verse for that. Whoa.
Oh, yeah.
Here we go.
Hang on. Okay, wait a second. One of the Bible verses, I had this handy because I knew we were going to need this.
Yes.
One of the Bible verses that Barton used to support his claim that the founders didn't call the Second Amendment he actually says this, the founders didn't call the Second Amendment the right to keep and bear arms. They called it the biblical right of self-defense. Mm-hmm. Now, I can't find any example anywhere of a founder calling it the biblical right.
But that's not in the Constitution.
No, here's the verse he cites. Here's the verse he cites. He cites Luke 11:21, okay, in which Jesus says, quoting Jesus here, when a strong man, fully armed, guards his own home, his goods are in peace. But if Barton also counts on the biblical ignorance of his Christian followers, not only the historical ignorance, because the strong man in that Bible verse is figurative for Satan.
Yes.
Oh,
it's talking
about saying Satan has the right to bear arms.
Yeah. Well, and if you take the study a little bit further, it's actually talking about using Satan to exercise Satan. Is basically what he's fucking endorsing.
Wow.
And just for fun.
No, this is in the Liberty University Law Review is where Barton wrote this shit.
Yeah, and just for fun, I decided to look up this God-given right bullshit, and anywhere could I find any such of a reference. And if you were to look at the Bible and examine the various connotations of the word right or rights or whatnot, there's 3 categories of rights. The rights of the poor to justice and access to basic human needs, the rights to possession of ancestral lands, and the right to claim abundant life in Jesus Christ. There is no basis.
Right.
And I think one of your followers, Chris, actually makes a very similar point in one of the comments to one of your articles. I can't remember which one. But to take it even further, what some people use to justify it, they use it, the 2 swords challenge, and it's from Luke 22:35 through 38. And the twisting of scripture they have to do to make it into supporting the right to bear arms is, in my opinion, comical. But it's just like, there is no biblical justification for it. I mean, they have to do such mental gymnastics to make it that if you go back to what the founders initially meant, it's not the same thing. You know, it's
and of course the founders weren't basing this crap on the Bible. Like Barton, his followers, Barton's whole premise is that, the Constitution is like based on the Bible. Okay. So, you got to, first of all, dispense with that. They were going back to the laws. And yes, they did refer back to laws. I mean, they like laws of, of England and whatever. And, not just like the federal constitution, the state constitutions, when I was talking about James Wilson and all that. But, nowhere. Remember when I did the debunking of the Lutz study?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So basically, that was the thing where you see the claim fairly often that anywhere from 34 to 94% of, depending on, wait, I'll explain those statistics in a second.
Yeah.
The usual one you see is that 34% of all quotes used by the founders came from the Bible. Okay, which is a twisting of a study that was done, and I'm not going to go into the details of all this, but no, 34% of the quotes used by the founders were not from the Bible. Barton adds like another 60% to that, somehow saying that because they were citing sources that cited the Bible and all of this sort of shit. And it was a study of documents during the founding era done by these professors at, I think, was it in Houston somewhere or whatever. And what it was the literature of the era, and that there is a note saying that the criteria they used for picking the documents was that the documents be of a certain length and different things that made there be it's kind of over representation of sermons among, because when they're saying documents, they were writings. They weren't saying documents, but writings. Okay, so most of the biblical quotes were from the sermons that were included. It wasn't, but the Barton, and then they'll change it to make it sound, they'll say not writings, but documents, implying that they're talking about like legal documents or constitutions or whatever. Okay.
Well, and let's be honest. I mean, Barton has had issues with using quotes for a very long time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But the point I made with this Lutz study is that one of the big findings of the Lutz study that, of course, Barton omits is that in the Lutz study, they went decade by decade, okay, of the sources where most of the quotes and people citing stuff came from. But then they single out the 2-year period when the Constitution was written and being debated. And the number of biblical citations drops to like nothing.
Yeah.
Well, I think in
that 2-year period, when lengthy pieces were being written in the newspapers and all of that.
And the thing is, though, like, okay, so why would it even matter if some of these guys were quoting the Bible? Like, who cares?
Yeah.
Because you're making laws based on they're debating this stuff, they're discussing what they wanted for the country, and even if some of them thought that they were getting their ideas from the Bible, we know most of them actually aren't, that it predates the Bible. So whether they think that's where it comes from, to me anyway, is kind of irrelevant. And we also know that many of the founders were even deists and look at Jefferson. He hacked the Bible to pieces and went, what the hell is that shit? I would love to get my hands on a Jefferson Bible, by the way, if anybody knows where I can find one. But
Amazon.
You can find one anywhere. There's been so many damn printings of the Jefferson Bible.
I have to look it up. But I mean,
it's even online.
This idea that, well, so-and-so quoted the Bible, therefore, what's in the Bible is law. It's like, no, it's just, that's what they like, the sound of what that said, maybe, if you can prove it. I quote Star Trek. Does that mean that I think that everybody should walk
our law should be based on Star Trek?
Yeah, or people should walk around in Starfleet. Well, actually, if people walked around Starfleet uniforms, that'd be kind of cool, but you know what I'm saying.
Just to interject the Lutz study that Chris was talking about, I think in our first episode we did with you, we talked about that study if people want more information. If you didn't want to Google it and want to just listen. Because we've talked about that before.
Actually, my big debunking of that, even more than what I've written online about it, is in Liars for Jesus Volume 2. There's a chapter called Was the Constitution Based on the Bible? And there's the major debunking. And it's got images of the charts that they distort in the book. So Liars and Jesus Volume 2 is it's got the whole let's say, which is also that's being used now by like the the National Council on the Bible curriculum in public schools and all of that. That's distorted in that's in our public schools. That's in public schools in 38 states.
Yeah.
The lies about this Lutz study.
Yeah.
As being taught in our public schools now, the bogus crap about that.
Mm.
And that's how influential Barton is, by the way.
Yeah,
that's the thing. That's like, look at that. Right. Barton is like everywhere. He's got his his hands in like everything. No matter what issue it is, he's got all his distortions of like Black history. He's got his distortions of Second Amendment stuff. He's got like any topic. He can use his distorting of history to address or whatever you call what he does.
Well, I think what's really profound about Barton, there was a Time article, the 25 most influential people.
2005, yeah.
Yeah, it came out in 2005. You and I have talked about it before, and David Barton made that list. And I remember some people were reacting to it, and they're like, "Oh, he's inconsequential."
Yep.
And it's
that's the biggest thing. That's the biggest problem.
That's the biggest. Yeah, and I think like just in the last 3 weeks, I've probably spent more time on the surrounding gun issue just because I'm not as informed about it as I should be. As I said, I avoid it like the plague. I'm more interested in dealing with poverty and the SNAP and ACA and all that stuff because it has huge ramifications for me. So it's kind of interesting to read these bits and pieces, and it harkens me back to that article and the comments surrounding it where people are like, he's nothing. And Rick Warren was in that piece as well. And I mean, all your big name players of today, although Rick Warren's been kind of quiet for the last couple of years, are in that article. And it is available online. I can throw the link in the...
What it is with Barton, here's Barton's influence, and you've kind of touched on it a little bit, is that if you go and you're debating like debating people on any of these issues or whatever, and you see the arguments they're using, okay, and you see the same arguments over and over, and you wonder, well, where did that come from? It's coming, it's coming from here, it's coming from there, but I keep hearing this same argument. Chances are it originally came from Barton.
Yeah, but a lot of the people make that
some of the other Christian nationalists then used Barton's arguments and his misquotes or whatever, and then it got so basically he's alone. He's influential himself. Okay, his ties to buddy with a lot of politicians, Congress members, and all of that. Okay, but his biggest influence is in how his arguments have spread, where half the people using them don't know where they came from, but they heard them, think it sounds like a good argument, they're using it. You can trace it back to, like I said, Barton's Second Amendment book has been out since 2000. That's an 18-year-old's book. You see now some of the crap from that book being used by all sorts of people. They have no idea where that argument or that misquote or whatever that they think is real, came from.
I think back to when I first heard of Barton. I was in a debate group run by fundamental Christians, and it was the America was founded as a Christian nation crap, and they were throwing these quotes at me from supposed founding father, the ones, Chris, and as an complete outsider, I'm having this stuff thrown at me. See, America is a Christian nation. And of course, I just thought that was a bit odd. So I, of course, researched it myself, which most people don't have the time or inclination to do. And I went, wait a minute, this guy's been busted for quote mining and making it up on virtually every quote that you've given me. No, you're full of shit. But most people, like I say, they don't have the time or the inclination to do that. People that have full-time jobs, sometimes 2 jobs, they got kids, got responsibility, they don't have time to sit there and pick through what this idiot is saying. And so, well, look at him, he has a library of documents written by the founding fathers. Well, of course he knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, it's so much harder to debunk than it is to like just make stuff up.
Yep. And Beth and I have talked about this in the past with not just pseudoscience, but with manufactured history as well. One bad claim that takes seconds to make can take hundreds of hours of time to research and debunk.
Well, and so the Mark Twain, the quote attributed to Mark Twain that's not really from Mark Twain. The thing, like a lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting on its shoes or something like that. I mean, it's a quote. I mean, it's, Barton will say like one thing in one sentence. He'll say something as if it's fact.
Yeah, I call it the 10 to 1.
Fact might take pages of, to prove that that's a lie. But he can rattle these things off. People listen to them. People repeat them. They get then repeated by somebody else, put in somebody else's book, put in somebody else's article, used by a member of Congress a lot of the time. And then you see these arguments, these same arguments popping up, and it's just like I was saying before. It's like the people using these arguments in these current debates and arguing with people online or serious people debating, don't even know where these came. It's stuff they've heard, but that's the influence of Barton. It started.
Well, I think that's a good segue into what I wanted to bring up about the history of the laws and stuff in the Supreme Court cases, because it harkens back to a tactic that Tom Parker uses, and he specifically deals with the abortion issue. And what his tactic is these judges that lead in the same way he does would write opinions and dissenting opinions that should be maybe 1 or 2 sentences. I dissent, yada, yada, this is why. They'll write pages and pages, and then they'll write law review articles, and then hoping these articles get picked up by Congress and yada, yada, yada down the line until they're eventually incorporated into these dissenting opinions that people misrepresent as being part of the law when they're not. And I think Morgan can attest to this with having to check each and every citation to cases, splitting off, what's a dissenting opinion, what's a concurring opinion, and, where do you draw that line? But especially with the abortion providers, primarily is they're doing this as a tactic, and that's what we're seeing. It's now being used with the whole I call it the spaghetti on the wall theory, see what sticks. We're finding this with the religious liberty cases of the last couple of years. They're just throwing these cases after cases. And if you look behind it, it's one of 2 groups, Liberty Counsel or Alliance Defending Freedom. And
Kelly Shackelford, the guy who threatened to sue me because he said I came close to libel when I said that he lied in a Supreme Court case.
Yeah. But it's just like, I mean, does Barton in his book, because I haven't read his book, I'm just going based on what you've written, does he talk about any of the court cases or what I think you mentioned in your article when the shift occurred in 2001-ish, as far as when it went from being militias to privately owned. But does he discuss, the prior history in the courts?
I honestly, I don't remember. Like I said, I wrote this 5 years ago. It's been 5 years since I even looked at that book. So I don't really know. I just wanted to, this is so weirdly off topic, but not really. You brought up the abortion debate. It's just something I wonder about that you might know. In doing some completely, absolutely unrelated research, I came across something that Jewish law, under Jewish law, a baby who doesn't live to be 30 days old is not considered a person, and does not have the have to have the whatever burial kind of stuff and whatever. And that just got me thinking, like, why isn't that the slam dunk argument for any abortion debate, that if Jewish law, we're not even talking about like a baby that's like not born yet, but a baby who's born but doesn't live for 30 days. And the reason for it, from what I've read in Jewish law, was that it was because so many babies did not live, that it was to make it so there was no grief for the mother of the loss of a baby that was less than 30 days old. Okay, and that was kind of like the reason for that. Okay,
Bobby and
this is something that's only recently been changed as far from what I've read. But why, if that was Jewish law for so long, why is that not the slam dunk argument of when a person is considered a person, if Jewish law didn't even consider a baby that's born but doesn't live for 30 days to be a person?
Yeah, I don't know where that shifted.
Well, part of it is, if you look at the history of the Reich, they have very loose affiliations with other religious denominations. But the overreaching split, so to speak, was really, really highlighted with the 9/11 memorial on what the agenda is. If you look at, they're all, for the third temple being built. Once it's built, fuck the Jews, and they go and do their own thing. Right, but if you look at, if you remember the big fiasco with the initial phases of the memorial for 9/11, it was the quote Christian cross, and that was it.
Right.
Then to get more impetus, push behind it, they added the Star of David. So there's a very loose. I think it comes into with that idea, that notion. It's just like the Catholic League being aligned with the Reich. Well, once the Reich gets into power, they're going to drop the Catholics faster than you can start them.
Right, but what is? But I mean, as far as the basic question of like, they all claim to.
Because it's not
a Jewish law that, I mean, if there's a Jewish law that says that a baby is not considered a person if they don't live to be 30 days old.
Because it's Jewish law. And
Christianity. Right, but they go back to Jewish law for everything else.
Christianity
and all that, so it's the picking and choosing.
Yeah.
But what I don't understand is why people on our side are not using that as an argument in the abortion debate.
I think personally, I find the bodily autonomy argument is better because it covers all the bases. To me, anyway. But yeah.
It's a debate I haven't been. I haven't. It's not one of the areas that I get into much. I just came across this, and it just occurred to me, like, well, why haven't I seen? That's why I said you guys would know more about this than me, and that's why I was asking.
Christians have this thing where they a lot of them respect Judaism. They understand that's their progenitor. Jesus says you're supposed to love everybody and Jews are great and all of that. But when it comes right down to it, they don't want to be seen as related to Judaism.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, they'll say that the Constitution is based on the book of Deuteronomy.
Oh, yeah, I know.
They pick and choose where it suits their purpose.
It's totally cafeteria.
So it's a pick and so this is one of those pick and choose which.
Yeah. If you were to ask a Christian, and I've done this quite a few times, are you a follower of Christ or are you a Christian? And they're like, well, I follow Christ. I said, oh, so you're Jewish. I'm not Jewish.
Because
Christ never renounced his Judaism. Right. And the arguments I have gotten into over this point are laughable because it's like, and that is like Deb said, it's a cafeteria picking and choosing of what supports their opinion. But a lot of Christians I've debated, for lack of a better word, and I'm going to say some of these people are not very smart, and I'm not generalizing. I'm saying these specific people.
That's like
really
are.
Oh no! I mean, I've talked to some Christians that.
I know what you mean. I'm kidding.
People just are not smart. I mean, literally.
I know.
And I'm not trying to be disparaging, but I don't think they've really rationally thought about what they're saying because they're just they actually think Christianity predates.
I have to interject. Bobby in the chat says they get their facts from tellmeimright.com.
I think what it is, because I mean some of the people that I've run up against are the types that believe that Christianity predates Judaism. Mm-hmm. That's how not smart they are.
Well, it's not being disparaging to call someone that says that's stupid.
Yeah, I mean, I carry on conversations with people concerning homosexuality in the Bible, and while we disagree, at least their reasoning is semi-sound. I might not agree with it, but it's not this bullshit. Well, no, Christ was a Christian. It's like, no, he wasn't. He was a fucking Jew, you moron. I mean, it's just, they literally are. And I don't like using this word because I really don't like calling people stupid, but they were stupid. It's just, and I think it's just.
Stupid is as stupid does.
Yes, stupid is as stupid does. I think, as Deb said, it's a cafeteria style picking and choosing of what supports their particular agenda or their worldview. And you see this, I mean, of course, you see this in the gun debate. You see, with Barton, you see it in his other things, like concerning, we're founded on a Christian nation. You see it in the creation evolution debate. I got into an argument with one person about, she doesn't believe in evolution, yada, yada, yada. I said, so you don't go to the doctor?
Yeah.
I said, well, no, I don't. I go to the doctor. I said, do you take antibiotics? And she's like, well, yeah. I said, why do you take antibiotics? Because that's evolution in action. Huh? They just, it's just that level.
They don't make these connections of like, and a lot of it too. Like, I blame quite a bit of this on the poor education in this country, and partially on laziness, but mainly on the poor education. Cool. And this is why, if you look, I think I've said this before to you guys. The Bible is not an easy read for people in this day and age with the reading comprehension in America. Okay, that most of them can't understand that. They want someone else to tell them what it means. If a person who they see as an authority, as a smart person, like they see Barton, telling them, this is what this, for like the one where he's referring to like the guy who owns the house, okay, defending his house, okay, yes, we know that it's figurative for Satan, okay, but to these people who can't comprehend the Bible because they don't have the reading comprehension to the ability to comprehend what it means and know what's, metaphors, what's this, what's that, okay, or even know what half the words mean, okay, they want someone to just tell them what it means and they will believe. Like if Barton says this Bible verse means this, then they will believe that Bible verse means what Barton says it does. And this is how Barton has been able to get away with the saying, he's got a Bible verse for Jesus opposing minimum wage. He's got a Bible verse for, against capital gains taxes. He's got what for, so with the people, these people who call themselves Christians, but are so Bible illiterate compared to people who aren't Christians.
Well, I think it goes back to Barton's influence. What people have to remember, David Barton was a politician and had much political influence in Texas.
Right, he was the co-chair of the Texas Republican Party.
Texas in their 2008 and I believe 2012, I might have my dates.
The critical thing,
Their platform, written directly into their platform, what they were running on was denial of critical thinking.
They wanted to stop
should not be taught in schools.
This was an actual plank in their platform. They came right out and said critical thinking should not be taught in schools.
So, I mean, and we're seeing, I think what we're seeing in some of these debates with just common people, we're seeing the results of this platform coming to fruition.
I just
go ahead
up, and there actually do exist cliff notes for the Bible. I'm just saying.
Yes. I have a copy.
And a lot of quote Bible studies that are held are very much like the ones that I went to when I was a Christian, where we read a verse and the person, and I was in a Calvinist church, so they didn't have a minister. They were like church elders, whatever. But the elder running the thing would say, okay, what do you think that means? And 2 or 3 of us would say what it means. And he would come in and say, no, that's not right. This is what it means. And so there was no actual, quote, studying of the Bible. It was this person is A, telling us what to read because they would pre-pick what part we were going to look at. And B, now I'm going to tell you what it means. And hi, Morgan, do you have ears again?
Yeah, for now.
Oh, that's why you've been quiet. I'm reading the side notes here.
Her headset conked out on her, but
yeah.
A couple of quick things too, since we're a little bit off topic. First of all, Chris, Dave is being driven crazy by your clock not running. He says, "I burnt my."
It's broken. I gotta fix it. It's this from a garage sale years and years ago. My Scales of Justice 1950s Scales of Justice clock, and I need to fix it. It's just such a cool clock, and I just haven't gotten around to fixing it. It got broken in one of my many moves, and I'm sure I can fix it.
It's okay. Dave is a bit of a sarcastic fellow, but he did say he burnt his dinner 3 times waiting for it to go. But, that's Dave. This is Dave that's also in New Jersey. So, you can...
Well, I want to know where in New Jersey Dave is.
I don't know. But also, Bobby had a question, and I'm just going to scroll back up because it was a little while ago. Where did it go? He said, Chris, I'd be interested to hear your views on religion in the military, IDF specifically. I don't know what IDF stands for, but I'm assuming you probably would.
IDF?
Yeah.
That's like so familiar, and why am I not?
Yeah, Bobby, if you could tell me what IDF
is it dealing with the Thai case that just
no idea
vindicated Mikey?
I don't know. While we're waiting,
I can't see the chat.
Yeah,
I should pull us up on YouTube so I can see the damn chat room. Why don't I have this up on my screen here?
You have to go to the page that we're like the watch link. Oh, he says
I can go from the link you posted on my Facebook page, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And then maybe the YouTube page?
Yes.
Let me just make sure my sound is off on my computer.
Just make sure you mute that sucker. He says IDF stands for Israeli Defense Forces.
Israeli Defense Forces?
So he's asking about your views on religion and the military in terms of the Israeli. I'm guessing this.
That's not
like
not something really know much
I don't
about.
know.
It's not a. I mean, the religion in the military, as far as like what with MRF, the American military, our military.
Can you clarify that, Bobby, a little bit? We're not really understanding what you want to know in terms of Israel. But anyway, he did have a quip, though, while we're waiting. He said, scales with broken clock is a metaphor for objective morals.
Or the justice system in America.
Yeah.
So my broken clock is a metaphor. Okay.
Yes, there you go.
Good to know. I'll just leave it broken and start calling it a metaphor instead of a clock.
There you go. It's your metaphor.
It's fixed.
It's art.
Don't worry about it now.
It's an artistic metaphor. Where'd you go? Oh. There we go.
Oh, yeah, now.
Okay, Dave, you can start cooking your dinner again. That's all good.
That clock's working.
For those of you listening and not watching, she switched it out with a giant alarm clock that actually is working. So there you go.
I have to explain the giant alarm clock. I used to have this thing, and I've still got remnants of it. I used to collect, this is going to sound really bizarre. Okay, things that are too big or too small for what they're supposed to be, but actually work. Okay, so like that's like the giant alarm clock, and I had things like it was just a collection of like weird crap that is something that's either too big or too small, like things like my mini dartboard. Okay, it's like it's smaller, and like I've got things all over the place. I used to have it as like when I had my apartment, I had like one collection on these shelves of just all these things that were too big or too small. So every time I see something like that's an alarm clock, but it's a gigantic, it's loud as hell too. It's gigantic, but it has to work. It has to work just like the actual thing. So there were criteria for my bizarre collection of weird shit.
No, I like that. I love miniature things too.
Did Bobby ever clarify or?
Not really.
Because I'm wondering if he's meaning religion as far as us supporting Israel, but I don't know if.
That's what I'm trying to figure out.
You need a place for things with no place. I gotta stop reading them. I pulled up the chat room and then I'm realizing that it wasn't a good idea.
I'm good to watch it. Another metaphor for the refugee crisis, but I don't think that's what he meant with the Israeli defense. Like, my sense is that he was trying to allude to the whole Palestine thing, but I could be wrong. I don't know. Like, I really don't know. I've always seen Israel as kind of a secular government, but again, I could be completely wrong. I don't know. I really don't know much about it. So,
yeah, that one has me baffled.
But I want to say, as the military, I don't know. I had no idea what he's.
That's okay.
Asking.
That's okay. Well, we'll see if he comes up with something.
He comes back with a specific question.
I think there is a slight delay between us and people watching get in the chat, because I get that.
Okay, that makes sense.
When I'm in chat, live chat as well, I find that there's a few seconds of delay, so maybe he's not, or maybe he's writing us a novel. I don't know.
Might be. He's just typing away crazily, telling us all about Israel.
You're on, dude. So, yeah, because my stupid microphone keeps flopping over. Damn it. Oh, here we go. No. He says, I saw Chris had a special interest in religion in the military. I served in the idea.
Oh, okay.
And wanted to know if Chris had a view on it. Okay.
Oh, I just honestly do not know enough about religion related to that to be able to answer questions about it.
Yeah, she knows about the American military, but she's not familiar with the Israeli military. So I don't know. Maybe Bobby can tell us, is religion prevalent in the Israeli?
I was under the impression it wasn't. I mean, but that's like I said, I'm no expert on this here.
Me neither, but I always had the impression that Israel was more secular than overtly into Judaism.
I mean, religious people,
I've never heard of a Israeli military engraving Bible verses on their guns. So
yeah, you know,
that was the we did that. We had the no. Some of those ended up in the Israeli military. The Jesus, you talking about the Jesus rifles?
Yeah, the Jesus.
Are you serious?
Yeah, because other countries were using those too.
I didn't know that.
That's kind of hilarious.
Not know what we're talking about.
I would laugh my ass off if there were Jesus rifles like floating around Saudi Arabia or some shit.
Oh, I'm sure there are.
Training. Let me explain to people what the Jesus rifles.
Yes,
this is going back a number of years with I work, of course, with the Military Religious Freedom Foundation, and one of our big, most bizarre cases ever was the discovery of the Jesus rifles. What it was a defense contractor called Trigicon, which is a Christian they make that's a Christian company that makes stuff like the night sights for rifles and stuff like that, right? So they had this huge government contract. I think it was like 800,000 of these damn things made. They're the sights that go on the M16, whatever the rifles are they're using. Okay, so they inscribed as part of the serial number or the model number of these night sights were Bible verse references. Okay, and these things were in Iraq and Afghanistan being used to train our forces, training the Iraqi, training Muslims.
Right.
Yeah, trying to get them to kill other Muslims, which right there is the way against their religion, with rifles that have a Christian Bible verse. It's whatever. Okay, and then there was this one NCO that then they started getting called the Jesus rifles, and there was this one NCO on a base, I think in Afghanistan, that very loudly in front of a big formation started saying, holding up, "This is your Jesus rifle. If you run out of bullets, it's your Jesus club." And how dangerous this was. There was one case with to do with these where a soldier had the muzzle of this rifle with this stupid scope on it, like stuck up his nose by a Afghan man. I mean, it's like this was absolute insanity. That going in Muslim countries with these rifles, besides it being the constitutionality of having our military,
it's problematic as hell.
On them. But they ended up in other countries, and who sided with us was the big Church of England guys, the Archbishop, whatever he is, of the Church of England came out with a statement against them because the British were also using them. These that like I guess nobody noticed, except like in all these countries that like actually are kind of like Christian countries didn't notice that like wait a minute, these are Bible verse inscriptions on these rifle sites. There's New Zealand, Israel, England, us.
Point out, Bobby says the Israelis didn't do it, but I did receive an American M16 with a quote from John. He said something about a guiding light, I think. And then he
said, because they were night vision scope.
That makes sense.
The whole thing was light. So all of the Bible verse references were references to Bible verses that had something to do with light.
Well, he said too, then afterwards he goes, I used a Trigicon scope. So there you go.
Yeah. The ACOG.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
That's problematic on a bunch of different levels.
Yeah.
Now he says
Of problems.
With all due respect, Chris, the quotes on the guns were nothing more than a Christian company putting Bible quotes on guns for U.S. military, and they ended up in different hands, but it wasn't on purpose.
Well, no, that's not true. These were being used by our military to train the forces in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Right.
Yeah, I think the company was doing this as
we actually had
thing
found
to Muslims.
photos of Iraqi and Afghan soldiers and police, the people they were training, with these, where you could clearly see the Bible verse reference on them. And then, so a lot of people in this country are detractors, opponents, whatever, were saying, oh, well, they're all illiterate. They wouldn't know what it means, this, that. You know what? Muslims recognize a Bible verse reference quicker than Christians do.
Imagine.
They're not stupid. They knew what it was.
At least in terms of what he was using. He said they weren't night vision scopes, but they were daytime scopes with the red laser sight dot.
Well, they make several different scopes, I'm sure. I mean, but the ones that
the one with the red
particular ones,
guiding light, laser sight guiding light.
Yeah, that's like the red dot that appears when there's a sniper or whatever, and you see somebody's head and they get blown away. Yeah. Okay, that's what that is.
You know what? If you don't have enough money to pay for a sniper, get one of those suckers and get, a really angry cat to jump on their face. I don't know.
The CIA was training cats actually this is back during the Cold War.
At least we're back on the
CIA
was guns.
Training cats to assassinate Russians.
You can bribe the cat. You can bribe the cat with some temptations or some shit to leave you alone.
But yeah, they were trying to figure out. The CIA was trying to figure out back during the Cold War if they could train cats to do spy work basically for the Americans, on the Russians, or to assassinate Russians, or just weird nonsense like that. I think the CIA just was I don't know, let's try everything silly.
This is like men who kill goats.
The men who stare at goats.
Men who stare. Yeah, he says he ended up with one, but nobody in the Israeli Defense Force believes in John. So, I don't think the Israeli forces were buying Bible.
Well, they did. The difference is that, if the Israeli forces ended up buying some of these Trigagon sites and unknowingly, and then they had Bible verses on them, they're not gonna. There's not a danger there, like there was with our forces using them in Iraq and Afghanistan against Muslims and to train Muslims, where we're trying to say it's not a holy war, right, and our soldiers are carrying around weapons that have Bible verse inscriptions on them. So they didn't pose a danger in, when the New Zealand forces got some, or the British or whatever. They're not going to say, the Americans, holy war, let's get them. Okay,
it goes back to it goes back to I believe Bush 2's statement where he basically stated that this is not a holy war, and then I think it was a couple months after he made that statement, these guns showed up being in the armed forces, and here they're
this is under Obama that those guns ended up.
Was it Obama? I was thinking it was Bush too.
Well, yeah, because it was in around 2010, 2011.
Oh, I was thinking it was older than that. Okay, yeah.
I didn't start working for MRFF until 2007.
Okay.
So and I'm thinking this was several years after. I'm thinking 2010.
I think I know what you're thinking of.
But here's the thing: we do not know how long prior to that they might have been being used, whatever. But it really doesn't matter. I mean, which president did it happen?
Yeah, it was basically to. I mean, here we have a president. Which one now? I'm not so sure. Stating that no, this is not a holy war, but we've armed our forces with Bible verses on their guns. So it was to avoid that perception, and that's why this raised such a stink for our military specifically, and the fact that they were going over to the Middle East. Like you said, if it was going to New Zealand, the perception wasn't there, so they didn't they wanted to distill that anti-holy war notion.
Yeah, he said the guns that he saw were at least 15 years old. But interestingly, he also
the guns might have been, but the sights might not have been.
I don't know.
Yeah, but it's possible because I remember under Bush too.
For the gun, so the types of guns that are used on have been around forever. So it doesn't matter. I mean, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter the technical whatever about them.
He also said that I found interesting. He said back to the cats. He says in Israel they have several animal units: dolphins, dogs, birds, all sorts.
Yeah, dolphins are used to detect underwater mines. And then also I was going to say under Bush 2, I remember when that rumor was starting about like dipping the bullets in the pig fat and all that stuff and using that to kill Muslims. I think that's what you're thinking of, Beth.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. That it was probably that, because I knew there was like a bunch of problematic stuff that our contractors were doing, and then regardless of what president it is, I doubt the president would be briefed on something like, oh, some contractor is writing Bible verses on their scopes. Like, I don't think that that's something that would be in Obama or Bush's purview. I mean, maybe whoever's doing those contracts, maybe, but I mean, that I think that's a bit above their pay grade. Or below their pay grade.
Below their pay grade, right? That's what I said. It didn't matter which president it was, because it wasn't like the president doing this. It was just one of those things where it was like, wait a minute, we got 800,000 these scopes out there that these damn Bible verse references on them and going into
while you're trying to say it's not
countries with them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was definitely the anti-Muslim sentiment that probably fueled that for sure. I don't think they just randomly were like, "Hey, let's put Bible verses on the scope." I think they're very aware.
Let me explain. This is a company.
At least the contractor was.
The contractor, the company Trigicon, is a Christian company that has always put Bible verse references and probably continues to on the stuff that they make.
It's very weird that they're doing weapons of war.
They have the perfect right to do that for their civilian market, because people use these for hunting and whatever too. Okay. These sites. Okay. So if they're selling them in the civilian market, that people want to have Bible verses on their guns, go for it, whatever. Yeah. But it was that the danger when they were being used by our military.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. That's just so odd
that not put those, and we won on that one. They ended up stopping doing it, and then the military issued kits to remove it, which I'm assuming was like a Dremel or something that got passed around the unit. Like, hey, get rid of those numbers on your freaking scope. But they idiotically did not do the ones that were over in the Muslim countries first. They were started modifying, taking the number off the ones that were here first. So then we had actually, it was a Baptist minister whose son was in the 101st Airborne, I think, that the soldiers were afraid of having these damn things. They wanted this shit off of these, things, Okay, so it was a Baptist minister who wrote to us and said that, the military is being so slow to get rid of this that he sent his own modification kit, he called it, to his son's unit. He sent them rolls of thin, I guess, duct tape or electrical tape that would fit to cover up his numbers. So that was the modification kit that a Baptist minister sent because he was so worried about his son and his son's unit having these.
Huh.
Yeah.
Well, ladies, we've come to the end of the show. So, I know it goes pretty fast, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Chris, anything you want to add before we go? And also, please tell us where we can find your books and your writings and all of that fun stuff. And thank you so much.
Just Amazon, search for Liars for Jesus, or go to liarsforjesus.com. And then for the military stuff, it's MRFF, Military Religious Freedom Foundation, MRFF.org.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us again. It's always a lot of fun, and we always learn stuff, so that's great. And Beth, where do we find you?
Easiest way is on Twitter, Dune9998. That connects to my blog, Havoc and Chaos, and as well as my Facebook page under Beth A. Hambridge. And I do have a YouTube page, but I haven't been very active on it lately, and that's under Beth A. Hambridge too. And one thing I just wanted to add, I mean, as I said in the beginning, we have 2 hours to brush a surface that's been argued about ad nauseum since 1600s. We'll just throw that out there. I mean, we're not going to solve the problem of gun control or owning guns within 2-hour time period. But I do really, if you want a different view and where it's a God-given right, you can start with Chris's article. I'm going to post in the group page.
And it's in the show notes as well.
Yeah, it's in the show notes. There's some other articles out there that I found, while I might not agree with them, I found them kind of interesting, or they brought up interesting topics. Like one point which we didn't discuss was that some have said that the whole gun control and the need for bearing arms was because of the slavery issue. I've seen both sides of that. I don't really have an opinion on it because I haven't read that much, but I thought it was an interesting argument.
It's something I've been wanting to research too. Maybe.
I mean, the general overall consensus I got from it was that no, that it's not a legitimate, for lack of a better word, but it's an argument to look into if you want to, strengthen your position or weaken it in some cases. But yeah, it's an issue I think we all need to look at. So, but yeah, look me up on Twitter. You'll find me.
Awesome. Miss Morgan, where do we find you? You're muted, by the way.
Yeah, I know. So you can find me on Twitter at Mostring. That's MOSTRING. And you can also find me on Facebook, Morgan L. Stringer. Just send me a little message saying, hey, I know you from a show or whatever. Or if we have mutual friends, and that's fine. But yeah, and you can also find me on the By Skeptical podcast of Trav and Moan. Comes out about every 2 weeks. You can find that on iTunes, Stitcher, or Spreaker.
Awesome. And you'll find all three of us this weekend at NanoCon in Nashville. So there is that. If you can make it out there, please do. It's going to be a lot of fun with a lot of really cool people, us included. Because, we're cool. And, of course, you can find me on Holy Crap the Vlogcast. It's holycrapthevlogcast.com, run by Shujin Tribble. Me and him and several of our motley crew of panelists from all over the globe. And we talk about all kinds of things that are generally secular related, but not always. So, yeah, you can find that. We're at 12:05 a.m. on Sunday mornings, which meant this weekend, even though we only went our normal 2.5 hours, it actually was 3.5 hours because we lost an hour in there somewhere. I don't know how that happens. I hate daylight savings time. I'm just saying. But yeah, I won't be on it next week because of course we'll be in Nashville, but there's that. And of course you can find me at Full Quranic, which is www.fullquranic.com, with the madcap adventures of Allah and his friends. And you'll hear me reading you the Quran so you don't have to read it yourself. Now, next week, we will, of course, be in Nashville. So we'll be traveling on Monday, all of us. So we won't be doing a show Beyond the Trailer Park on Monday. So we'll have that week off. Week after that, I'm not 100% sure, but I think we might be doing something called Sovereign Citizen Bingo. Looking to get a couple of people to join us and maybe watch some Sovereign Citizen videos and play bingo, because that's damn funny shit. I've seen some other people do it on their channels and it's hilarious. So that's what we're looking at, but that won't be for 2 weeks. So join us then, or like I said, get your ass to Nashville if you can do that and come see us at NanoCon. There's going to be all kinds of great people, great speakers. I hope to learn some street epistemology so I can go ahead and I can debate some Christians maybe, or maybe some Muslims in real time using street epistemology. So we'll see. Oh, hey, Apostate Prophet's watching. Hey, Rico. Thank you. He said we had a nice conversation. So, hey, thanks for dropping in, dude. So anyway, we'll see you in a couple weeks. And until then, I will leave you with our human creed for humankind, and we'll see everybody.
I know the truth and power of reason and of rational thinking, and I will use them to my advantage. I know the truth and power of educating myself and of expanding my intellectual boundaries, and I will educate myself. I know the truth and power of vanquishing ignorance, and I will do so whenever the opportunity presents itself. I know the truth and power of morality without supervision, and of true and accurate righteousness. I know the truth and power of obliterating tyranny, be it intellectual, emotional, or philosophical, and will work toward that goal whenever and however possible. I know the truth and power of human ingenuity. I know the truth and power of human compassion, and I will be mindful of the welfare of others. I know the truth and power of equality and fairness for all living things. I know the truth and power of the importance of our families, our friends, and our fellow men and women. I know the truth and power of human stewardship of our lands, our waters, and our skies, and I will try to act to preserve our environment. I know the truth and power of the sciences of mathematics, of physics, and of chemistry, and of the important role of these disciplines in understanding the workings of this cosmos. I know the truth and power of the rejection of all notions or beliefs that reside in the supernatural or the superstitious, and of those notions or beliefs that we are not supposed to be able to explain. And I know that these rejections are necessary for humankind's survival. I am a human being with a free mind, liberated from irrational influence and from unreasonable dogma.